most commonly asked questions that I get in my practice and here on the channel about dragons is, when did I start working with them? And how did I meet them? How did I encounter them? And when did the dragons really start being present within my life? And well, today I'm going to share with you guys a little bit of a story time of how the dragons have always been present in my life. And I'm sharing this story time because I think that I'm not alone. I think that so many of you guys have the same experience with, like, as I do in childhood. Some of your earliest memories are of your dragon guardians. And today we're going to really break that down through the story time of how I really started to connect with the dragons as a very, very young child. And if you're new here, Assalamu alaikum, merry meet, and welcome back to your daily dose of DragonFaether. My name is AZURA DragonFaether, the Draconic Priestess, and today I will be your host and telling you guys how I was raised by the dragons. And this is something that is a very bittersweet story for me, so please go grab some tea, grab a snack, and sit down, because this one is a little hard for me to tell, but at the same time is the pinnacle of who I am. So let me get a little bit more comfortable here. I'm out in my front yard because I absolutely love the fairy energy out here, and I would love to make a video on the fairies here in my property, but story time for another time. However, my earliest memories were of the dragons, and the adults around me used to call my dragons imaginary friends, and I never really understood that as a kid, but honestly, I would always listen to the dragons, and they always would tell me things that I shouldn't have known, yet I did. I was a very bright child in the sense that, like, I started speaking before I was 1 year old, and I started reading when I was, like, before 1 year old. Like, my mom read bedtime stories to me every single night, and it really helped my brain, like, develop as a kid. And many of these stories, you know, that I was read were from my nursery rhymes and even had dragons in them. And so dragons were really just a huge source of awe, of power, of wonder, of magic for me growing up. And unfortunately, I was left alone a lot as a child. I was born in Denver, Colorado, and I pretty much lived there until I was 5 before I moved here to Los Angeles, California. Hey, hi, hello. I grew up in Aurora, Colorado, and if you guys have never been to Aurora, Colorado, it's a really beautiful, quaint little town, and there's so many, like, nature spots and so many access points to the Rocky Mountains there. And so a lot of my earlier experiences with the dragons were shaped through the Rocky Mountains and through my camping trips with my dad in the Rocky Mountains. And, you know, my earliest memories were of 3 different dragon guardians. The one that we all know and love on the channel, Monte, who at the time I thought was an air dragon. But I come to find out that he is an angel dragon now, which is definitely a video for another time. And then I had another dragon named Aquadon, and this is a dragon that I connected with when I went swimming. I learned how to swim before I was 1 year old as well. Shout out to my mom for teaching me how to swim. Super amazing. She is so incredible. She would teach pretty much every kid how to swim at the swimming pool if they didn't know how to swim. Such a beautiful heart she has. And then my dragon guardian, Saphira, who I haven't really talked too much about on this channel, but she is a frost dragon. And these 3 dragons were really the main source of my connection to dragons as a child. There were a couple other ones, but it was really these ones that I interacted with, like, on a daily basis, I would say. And it's genuinely because, like I said, I was left alone a lot as a child, and unfortunately when my parents were married, because they got divorced when I was 5, there was a lot of tension in my household. I also had 2 older siblings that are 13 and 14 years older than me, and so I really felt like I had 4 parents. But because of my parents working, and because of, you know, like, my siblings, like, being, like, teenagers and, like, you know, doing teenager things, I again was left alone a lot. And a lot of my memories growing up as a kid were of having to entertain myself and having to, you know, self-soothe and really kind of, you know, get used to exploring life all by myself. And this wasn't, like, I wasn't completely neglected, right? Like, I had a really close relationship to my dad my whole life, but, you know, my mom, I really struggled with connecting with her when I was a little girl. But again, these are stories for another time. This is just the context for how I had room for dragons in my life the way that I do now. And as a kid, you know, like, I was so lonely, and I had no friends because I was a child. This was before I was 5 years old, by the way. I moved out to California, like I said, when I was 5. So it's really, really sad to me because like I really was just like looking for a family, and as a little girl I was really obsessed with like drawing my family together and happily together because they just weren't happy together. And you know, my mom, I love her so much, she had a really bad drinking problem when pretty much all throughout my growing up, and shout out to you, Mom, for being sober. I'm so proud of you. But growing up it was hard, and I would sometimes just get left alone while, you know, my mom was just kind of out drunk. And I'm not trying to like, you know, hate on my mom or anything. I'm not trying to shape her as a bad person. Like, she has her own story about why she, you know, was drinking and all of that. And well, it's not my journey to share. It is my journey, how it affected me and how it, you know, opened up this need for family and need for like a guardian, if you will. You know how they call our parents parental guardians? Well, my parental guardians really just ended up being my dragons, and I would spend so much time with them, and I would always want to go to the pool and swim with Aquadon, and I would always want to go, you know, out into the snow and play with Saphira. I would always want to go fly in planes and hang out with Monte. And this was before I, like, you know, knew their names, right? Like, their names, you know, kind of evolved over time, but like I'm talking about like really, really young age, right? Like from age like 1 to 5 is like what I'm talking about, how I was raised by the dragons. And whenever I felt lonely and whenever I felt scared, I would just entertain myself and start talking to dragons, and the dragons would tell me things. They would show me visions. They would, you know, make me feel safe and make me feel comforted when I had no way of regulating myself. I had no idea what was going on, especially when my family divorce started to happen. I was so young, and it was during the time when my mental, like my brain development was happening. Like, you know, when we form our personalities, it's between like 4 to 7 years old, and that was such a traumatic experience for me as a little girl, was, you know, having my whole family fall apart. I grew up with all my family under one roof, and then before I knew it, we were all scattered in different houses. My brother lived somewhere else. My sister lived somewhere else. My mom moved me to California. My dad, you know, followed us here. You know, my sister followed us to California too, but my brother stayed behind in Colorado. And it was always such a huge source of terror for me as a little girl. There was so much uncertainty, and during the divorce there was so much, like, I felt like no one heard me, and I felt like my dad was trying to tell me what was going on, but he was like under court order to where he could only see me on Wednesdays and during the weekends because of like unsupervised visitations. Like, there's a lot of really dark stuff within that, you know, the divorce story, which is why I said this story is kind of bittersweet, because my dragons have always been my family. When I didn't know how to connect with my real family, and I promised myself I wouldn't cry in this video, but like I said, it's a really emotional story. And, you know, I don't just say that like, you know, oh, I've been connected to dragons my whole life. Like, no, like dragons were my lifeline. Dragons were what kept me grounded. Dragons were what kept me happy and what kept me full of wonder and awe and magic as a child. And I couldn't be who I am today if I abandoned my faith in the dragons when I was just a little girl, despite everyone telling me that they were just imaginary friends, or that they were just like, you know, like figments of my imagination. They weren't real, blah, blah, blah. No, I always knew they were real, because they always took care of me, and they were always there, and they were always there to comfort me and, you know, keep me close and remind me that I'm worth it and I'm beautiful and I'm intelligent. The guardians always told me, little dragon, keep going, you're so brilliant. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know who I would be. Which is why, like, you know, I've always been on the draconic path ever since I was little, ever since I could remember. Some of my first memories are of the dragons. And, you know, like, I know I'm not the only one. I know that likely if you found my YouTube channel, you're probably like me. Like, you're probably just like me in the sense that dragons have always been a safe space for you as a kid. Like, I also was born the same year that Pokemon came out. You can do the math if you want to see how old I am, but like, the truth is like, Pokemon was a huge part of my childhood in the sense that, like, Charizard being a dragon, like, I maybe not a dragon type, blah blah, but like looking like a dragon. And I remember my books of shiny Charizard being a black dragon with red wings, and I just felt so safe, and I felt so, you know, what's the word, guarded and watched over and loved by the dragons. And just the image of the dragons always were like my compass, you know, like following the dragons. And when I say I'm just a girl who follows her dragons, it's because I literally always have been. Like, in any time in my life when it seemed like things were falling apart, when it seemed like, you know, I wasn't gonna be okay, when it seemed like, you know, I might die, because I've been through a lot, guys. Like, I've been through a lot. And you know, when I felt like I might not make it through the night, or when I felt like I might not make it to the next day, like, I always fell back on my dragons. And while I always loved God, you know, I was raised Mormon, and while I always loved God and always like knew God was real, guess what? I struggled with my faith in God back and forth because of the abuse I went through in the Mormon church. And it was always the dragons that kept me on the path. They were like, it was man who hurt you. It was the hands of man who hurt you. It was never God who hurt you. Don't abandon your faith, little dragon. And some people might think I'm crazy. Some people might think I'm mentally ill. Some people might think blah, blah, blah. And like, you know what? Like, I do struggle with mental illness. Like, hey, hi, hello, I'm not ashamed of it. And like, so many people who are like me, who struggle with mental health, who struggle with the trauma, who struggle with abuse, who struggle with neglect, who struggle with things like that, a lot of them find comfort and safety in dragons. And that is why my channel exists the way that it does today, because I'm not alone. And chances are that, like I said, if you found my channel, chances are you too, my friend, absolutely love dragons and have ever since you were little. And if you are one of those people, let me know in the comments below what your childhood was like with the dragons, because you aren't alone, and there's a whole community of us. And if you want to join us, don't forget to click the first link in the description to join the Hatchling Clan Discord server, because we all love dragons, and we've all been guided by dragons, and many of us, just like me, have been raised by the dragons too. And I want everybody to know that I'm just a girl who follows her dragons. I'm literally nothing else. Like, I have faith in the dragons. I have faith in their symbolism, faith in their myths. I think they're so real because every single culture has some sort of dragon throughout history that could have never encountered each other, and it's just a part of the human experience. And I realized this as a very young girl. And, you know, the dragonology books definitely influenced me, okay? I am not ashamed, okay? Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and dragonology really influenced me. But also, you know, movies like Dragonheart, and movies like, you know, Aragon, and movies, you know, like just anything about dragons, even like Lord of the Rings, and like the books and stuff that I read while growing up, like all of the dragons that were hidden within plain sight, I saw them, I heard them, and I understood them, and I never ever let anyone else tell me otherwise. And there were a few times where I really questioned the dragons, but it was very, very later in life. Growing up, I always loved them, and I always felt so connected to them, and I always used to run around my house with my dragonology plushies, pretending that I was flying with the dragons. And while this was just like my childhood imagination to a certain extent, I was really tapped into the dragon energy in an authentic way, in such an innocent, natural way that is not uncommon. Like, I'm not unique in that sense. Like, you have experienced that too, haven't you? You have also experienced playing with the dragons when you were little, haven't you? I know I'm not alone, and when I would tell this story to people in my real life, they would call me crazy, say I need to go to an insane asylum, just really, really horrible things, right, to a human being. And it's only because they didn't understand, and they didn't see the dragons, and they didn't believe, but you do, and that's why you're here. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today, listening to my story of how I was raised by the dragons, and I'm more than happy to share more about my journey And if you want to share your journey, please let us know in the comments. I would love to read your comments about how the dragons raised you too. And if you want to talk to more people who love dragons and more people who are also raised by dragons, again, please join the Hatchling Clan Discord server. We would love to have you. It's the first link in the description down below. And if you missed any episodes, you know what I mean? Like, please go check out my Dragon Magic playlist. Go check out my Draconic Wicca playlist. Go check out my, you know, Draconic Path playlist. And I have all these different playlists for you that you can find more about dragons from over 13 years of an archive that I've been posting about them. But even though I only started my YouTube channel in 2012, my journey with the dragons didn't start then, no. I've always been on a path with dragons, and I would love to share more about my encounters with them in Colorado before I moved to LA, especially in the Rocky Mountains. Many of the dragons that I met in Colorado are still with me today, and of course, if they'll let me talk about them, right? I only very recently got clearance from Saphira to share about her, but it's because a lot of these dragons, they represent and they are in my life for very, very painful reasons. They found me and they uplifted me and they supported me so I would keep going, because most children, they see dragons. Most children, they see fairies, they see mythical creatures, they see the spirits of the land, and they engage with the unseen in a way that, you know, has been documented throughout history. But many of us, especially in the modern time, get it beaten out of us, and that's what my channel is for. My channel is for reconnecting with that childhood-like wonder within your heart and before the abuse, or, you know, if you met the dragons because of the abuse or anything like that. Like, my channel is supposed to be a sanctuary for you to realize that you're not alone, that you have a family, and that the dragons are really with you. And we won't judge you. Everybody's journey on the Draconic Path is so different, and that's why it's so beautiful. And, you know, nobody can own the dragons. Nobody can define it. Nobody can, you know, really put their finger on it because of how unique dragons are to each one of us in our life experience. And so I would love to hear your journey about how the dragons raised you too. Please, seriously, please share with me in the comments. Like, you don't understand. I grew up feeling like a freak because of this, and having this channel has reminded me that I'm not alone and that I'm not a freak, and that it's actually way more common than you think. And this has been such a healing and beautiful, magical journey for me with you, the hatchlings. You know what I mean? Like, look at all that we've done together. Look at all that we've accomplished. Look at how much we believe in the dragons. No one could ever take it away from us unless we let them. So let's not let anyone ever shift our faith in the dragons, because they are real if you choose to believe. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to the channel today. I thank you so much for spending some of your day with me today here in my front yard, hanging out with the fairies, telling you guys about how I was raised by dragons. But I will definitely see you tomorrow. Not really sure what tomorrow's episode will be, but it's gonna be a good one. That's what I know for sure. But anyway, until next time, stay geeky, cheeky, and freaky, little hatchlings. But Kadafis, blessed be. Amin.